I know Penny and Gabe for I've known them for a long time. Penny more in terms of being a filmmaker, I really admire and appreciate her body of work. In part because she makes the kind of documentaries that I love and that are often unsung, which is a kind of funny thing to when you consider that one of my favorite films of hers is the Kenny G doc, and he's an instrumentalist. So um, anyway, I love her films. I'm sure many of you are here and are familiar with them. Off the top of my head, Our Nixon, Confessions of a
Good
what? Good
Samaritan.
Samaritan. um, Mrs. America, the series you've been working on, many more, and uh, and Gabe, uh, I've known for what is it, maybe 15 years or
I
so.
think I think 16 years maybe.
16 years. He
Yeah.
started out as a working with Laurie Cheadle, my producing partner, on four of my films. So Gabe was my associate producer on The Kids Grow Up, and still had a big involvement in 112 Weddings when we were working out of Dumbo. So it's been a thrill to see him go on and become a producer of stature, and to see him collaborating with Penny. And so I want to get a lot of things. There's so much to talk about. But I'll start off with you, Penny. Just you started filmmaking a little bit late. Um, what were you doing before then, and when did you always want to be a filmmaker, or did the bug bite you at some point? And then how did you manage to segue into your first film?
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Um, I did not always want to be a filmmaker. I was an artist as a child, as all children are, and until I got to be the age where the inevitable comparisons began, and I felt that I was not as good at drawing like an apple from life as the person next to me was in seventh grade art class. And so I thought, I guess I'm not an artist. And I sort of pivoted to like being more I was always in love with school. So I kind of went down this very academic path. I became a college professor and all that kind of stuff. So the filmmaking came about in a really cool way where I think my junior year of college, I got a summer internship working at a community media center that was like in downtown Poughkeepsie. It was called Children's Media Project. And they needed someone to help them teach kids media literacy, but the way they were doing it was through teaching kids media production. And as an academic, I was very interested in media literacy. That was like one of the topics that I was studying. I had an education minor and all that, so I wanted to do it for that reason. But then as soon as I got into these classrooms with like kids as young as like 5, I was like so overwhelmingly inspired by their creativity and their joy that they took in like making their own videos. And so it was really that turned me on to being a filmmaker. It was learning how to make films alongside little kids who were learning with me. I always knew like a little bit more than them, but not much more. And in college, I had lots of friends that were like film majors and were making, their student films or whatever, but I just would never have imagined having the confidence to do that. Like later, when I became a film professor myself, I always told my students this at the beginning of the semester that like the willingness to show up and make art and present it to people that are not you is so incredibly brave. I didn't have that courage at that age. It took me many, many years of making kind of weird little experimental films that I was really only comparing to that of 5-year-olds before I ever had the confidence to really pursue it myself. So, long story short, kind of very gradually from there, kind of transitioned my brain from being like someone who was foundationally interested in like media education to being someone who wanted to like make films. And even going to get an MFA, it was really in that process that I sort of really owned being an artist myself. But yeah, I was a college professor for many years. And I left that a full-time tenured teaching job in 2019 to co-found a company with Gabriel.
Great. And Gabe, what was your path into you know before forming that company with Penny?
Um, I bounced around some different countries. I'm from Sweden. Um, I worked in a, I started doing anything in film because I worked in a video store, and a customer came in looking for a film that I loved, and we started chatting, and she asked what I wanted to do with my life, and I said I didn't quite know, and she said, I have a fancy video camera, you should borrow it and try to do things. And I did, and horsed around with that for a while. And then she said, you should learn more, and set me off on a path that took me to Prague. And from Prague, it took me to New York, where I tried to work in fiction film for a while, which I found incredibly depressing and dehumanizing. And I think I was just unlucky, kind of ended up in some productions that were full of jerks. Um, and by chance, I knew somebody who introduced me to a wonderful producer called Laurie Cheadle, who said that she needed to hire somebody to work in a film by a director called Doug Block. And that's how I started working in documentaries. And and then kept doing that until I collided with Penny, and as she said, kind of formed our own company to go forth.
What was it about Penny that made you feel like this is the one I want to work with? By the way, they never appear in interviews together, so I'm like totally committed to embarrassing them.
That's
No,
great.
Penny knows this story. I'll tell you the first time I knew that I wanted to work with Penny. Well, it's kind of a dual-sided thing. I saw about when she was making Nuts. She was at IFC Week, whatever it's called, IFP, what the thing, yeah. And I saw a blurb about it and thought, oh, this film sounds so much fun. I'd love to work on that. But I didn't have any kind of institutional power enough at the company I was at then to make a decision to get us involved with a film in that way. Um, we were, I was working on another film, and we were mixing at a gigantic studios, a sound post-production place in New York. And when I was in there mixing, I saw some notes left from another session of a film that had been there before. It was a little notepad. And I looked at it, and it said on the notepad, the time-coded notes for things, and one of the time codes said, "Dream goat yell!" exclamation mark, or "more dream goat yell." And I thought to myself, I should be working on the film and with the filmmaker that has the note "Dream Goat Yell" on their film. That's the kind of shit I want to be making. And
Gabe,
and
my
then I
notes
just
are like
and I
that.
sought her out. I wrote Pen, and I said, we should have coffee and talk.
He wrote to me, and this had happened a number of times. I had made not that many films. That was like only my second feature, Nuts. And so I had sort of been trying to figure out my producing part. And like I'd had sort of like different people work on different projects, as many of us do, but no one was like in it for like the Penny Lane journey. Like they were kind of in it for like that particular film for whatever reasons they had. And I had met with a number of kind of producers on these sort of set up coffee dates to be like, maybe we should work together. And like, it just always felt very vague. The thing I think is important, Gabriel, is that you came to me with an idea.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, it wasn't just like,
Yeah,
oh, let's meet and like
let's
chat.
hang
Like
out.
you
Yeah,
brought me
it's
the
true.
idea for Hail Satan.
Yeah,
So, and I was like, oh, like this person completely understands what I'm about and like what kind of films I want to make because this is like I had sort of heard of the Satanic Temple and I had like made like a mental note, as many of us do, like look into that. And then I'd completely forgotten about it. And so when Gabriel came to me with an idea that was his, but was also sort of already mine, I was like, oh, we're on the
yeah,
same wavelength. Like this is a project that I absolutely would want to direct. And that had never happened with any of these other kind of like set up chats with producers, all of whom were very nice. So the idea that like we just had like clearly a very similar interest in like what kinds of films we wanted to make. And
yeah.
Gabriel I think was ready at that point in his career, which maybe we could talk more about, to like take on higher level producing work. Like he wanted to
Hmm.
be like not just someone's AP, but someone's producer.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So what was
And exactly this, that it was kind of it was a combination of instinct of just knowing Penny's other films and the vague idea that I wanted to work with her and the kind of more educated sense that this was the right film specifically to kind of as my first film with her. So it made perfect sense.
yeah. Gabe, in the past, you worked on sort of every level of film other than like
Yeah.
actually, being the person who raises the money. And,
Yeah.
so how did you set up roles between the two of you? Did you take on like were you both equally going out after funding? Was one of you taking that on? Like what was the breakdown of roles, if there was even something defined like that?
I think especially when we started working, Penny was very much kind of a producing director, if I may say so. Like she was um, thought more than I did, frankly. I think she was more experienced with that, kind of thought more aggressively and bigger picture about how to kind of go about in that way. And both in terms of kind of how we could think about pitching and going after funding. This is at least my memory of how we kind of talked about Hail Satan. And also in terms of we didn't have, as we do now, the kind of infrastructure of associates or a company at all. So we had to wear so many more hats. And I think that Penny wore many producerial hats, which was greatly to my benefit because there was still so much that I just didn't know and was kind of figuring out on my own. And I don't know actually from Penny's perspective if she felt that way, that it was like gaps to be filled in. But I know that it made my life easier. And I think that my memory is that it allowed us to um, pursue this idea with a kind of healthy um, aggressiveness and ambition that perhaps my Swedishness would have been a little too timid to allow for otherwise. That
There was
like
definitely
typically maybe would be like a producer's role to kind of do, to be like, rah, rah, and
That's
it's not
funny.
always
Well, I
me.
will say, like, like the fundraising stuff, I think we approached as just partners at the beginning. Over the years, we've definitely like more divvied up responsibilities in a much
Yeah.
clearer way. Like at this point, Gabriel cannot claim that I am like doing any kind of producing. Really not. Like, and it's been a huge,
Oh,
huge privilege
I
in my brain, in my life. Well, whatever. Let me have my
yeah, we'll talk
statement
about it.
first.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
been a huge privilege for any director to be able to actually focus on directing because it truly is a different hat. Like everyone on this call probably knows this. It's like completely switching between different ways of thinking to be like the dreamer, the visionary, the kind of like artistic, vision quest, follower, and to be the person who's like, can we afford that? Is it legal? Like all these other questions that really do kind of hamper the first way of thinking if you're not careful, if you don't have the right partner. So that's been really amazing. But the other thing I want to say is that the Gabriel came along. It wasn't that he had experience fundraising. It wasn't that like was the missing piece for me. It was the fact that I didn't know how to work with a crew. Like my
Mm,
first feature was all archival. I did it all in post. There was no shooting involved. I had very limited and not good, technical skills in the camera department. I'm not a shooter, never was, tried for years to be a shooter, really never got the bug. And I had it still was working on my self-confidence as a director to the point where I could like literally direct a crew. Like the first time I ever really directed a crew was on Nuts, but it was like these people that I kind of did know more than. And so it was almost like I was hiring students to be the DP. So it wasn't very intimidating. When I started working with Gabriel, the idea was, okay, here is someone who knows how to like work in an actual professional manner with like a crew. Like there's like roles. I didn't know what all the roles were. I didn't know what an AC was or a gaffer or anything. I'll never forget the first time I did a shoot with Nady Gomez, who's now been my DP through Gabriel because he brought me Nady. Our first shoot was on a short film. We ended up doing a short film together first as we were kind of building up the budget to do Hail Satan. And she like set up the whole shot, and I just couldn't believe how long it was taking to set up the shot. I was like, this is insane. I've been standing here for 2 hours, and she's still like I don't know, putting the camera on. I was so confused. But then she showed me in the frame and I was like, oh, I love it. I love the lighting. And she was like, I haven't lit it yet. Like she hadn't even started lighting. Like like I was really not coming from that world. I didn't go to film school. I went to art school. So I had just sort of learned whatever I had learned on my own idiosyncratic way. I'd never been on like a professional film set. So Gabriel had been to film school and had been on film sets. And so for me, it was an opportunity to professionalize. I had been handling the budgets and all that myself, and I was like not that great at it, like competent, I'm intelligent, but I wasn't like that good at it. Like I wasn't really that good at keeping track of the receipts and all that kind of stuff. So that also was something that we were leveling up together on. But so yeah, so Gabriel was saying this before, but like I had had quite a lot of experience in grant writing, and this makes perfect sense because I had been basically an academic artist, a working professor with this like research agenda, which was my video art at first, and then that kind of became documentary. And so I had tons of experience writing grants. So together we started writing grants for Hail Satan. That was the beginning. We got like some development funding and some small grants from funders to like be able to like start that process
Yeah.
before we had our first experience of like pitching, going into at that time a physical room
Yeah,
to like
traveling to
present the
LA to like
project.
set up meetings with all of the
Yeah.
places. Yeah,
So that was our both of our first
everyone
time
did.
doing any of that with Hail Satan.
Yeah.
Gabe, you'll appreciate this. You guys are like next to each other in this frame. And I did this film that Gabe helped out on called 112 Weddings, where I shot wedding videos for many years on the side to supplement my documentary income. And went back in the film to 9 of the couples to see how their marriages were going. And I'd always have them sitting next to each other on a couch so we could, get body language and all that sort of stuff. And I always ask them questions like the big question was always like, who handles the money in this?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Oh
How,
yeah. Gabriel
um,
handles the money.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Um,
the choice of who to work with is as important, if not more important, than who you marry. Like it really is. This is like, how we spend our days is at work. And
Yeah.
so, like, I truly don't know what my life would be without Gabriel. Like,
right.
I had no idea. And I'm sure Gabriel feels the same way.
Same.
Like, what would we be doing had we not
uh,
happened to connect, in
yeah.
2017 or whatever it was, 2016.
Completely, I have no idea whatsoever because it's not just kind of making films. It's exactly this, right? It's like it's how we spend. Like I spend as much time with Penny as I do with my family. I mean, really. And if you don't enjoy that, if it's I don't know what it would be like to kind of bounce between different things in that way. I think it would be deeply unsatisfying compared to kind of the experience I have now, which feels rewarding emotionally and philosophically, not only kind of professionally in that sense. Yeah.
Um, I will not totally agree with that, Penny, in case my wife sees this recording. But I'd say there's actually a kind of balance in that, she's actually had envy or jealousy or whatever in certain cases of, the partnerships that I've had, with women who I've worked, collaborated closely with. Gabe, does your wife have any, uh, how does she feel about your relationship with Penny? Is that an issue at all?
No,
Okay.
definitely not. I
Okay.
I
think
think
she
it's like
knows that
such
I would
different
be.
sides of Gabriel's personality
It
at
is.
work and
I'm
at
a very
home.
different person kind of at work than at home in a way. And I also just think that she, just like anybody wants to see the one you love thrive, right? She can tell, she, I've known her since before I started working with Penny, and I think that she can tell the joy and the
Yeah.
thriving. No, I'd be, no way. She'd be so miserable if I weren't working with Penny, because then I'd probably be miserable.
Yeah. Marjorie's the same way, feels the same way about Lori and how I've worked with Lori
Yeah, of
for years.
course. Yeah.
But interestingly enough, Lori set very definite limits. Like, do not call me after, like 6 o'clock at night. Do not
Hmm.
call me on weekends. So do you have boundaries that you guys have set? Like you don't talk after a certain time?
Nothing so much. I think
No,
I think we implicitly have similar boundaries, so we've never really
I think
talked
so.
about them. Like it's not like I'm calling him at midnight with like every half-brained idea. I just wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that to anyone. Why would I do that? So, we call each other on the weekend. It's usually more like in a casual, like friendly
Yeah,
way.
or if somebody's excited about something and we just
Yeah,
had a
I feel like
thought that
I'm
we need
allowed to
to,
call Gabriel at any time if I'm
I
calling
agree.
with like good news or like
Yes.
a great idea for a movie that I just had. But if I'm calling with like a difficult work problem, like I'm gonna put that on Trello, guys. Like that goes on the meeting agenda for like
Yeah.
the next staff meeting.
Okay.
I think I think the limits are kind of intuitive and understood. When I had my first kid, I took 3 or 4 months off work, and work was ongoing. And my understanding, of course, I wasn't quite there for it, but I mean, I really barely heard from Penny during that time, aside from kind of like how's it going with life in general and kind of those kind of check-ins, but no like work bothering in that sense. I think that my understanding is that there was plenty of stuff kind of piling up, but that it was just very efficiently kind of managed to not fall on my doorstep. I thought of that the other day because somebody was telling me just a few days ago, I met with somebody who was telling me how they were also working in film and advertisement, and they said that their business partner, when they had their first child, did the exact opposite and kind of felt very jealous of the lack of attention, to the best of my understanding, and started emailing even more and calling even more and questioning why they weren't there. And within the first 4 weeks, everything kind of fell apart. I think all of that is just to say it's hard. Like the big picture idea of like forming a company with someone, having a professional relationship that transcends just one project that goes over several films. It is a deep relationship. It really is. It's a strong, deep relationship. And so to the idea of boundaries, I guess I'm grateful that we never set that it's felt intuitive and that we never had to kind of write down a set of rules. It's worked very well to kind of
Yeah,
intuitively
no, we haven't
understand
had
how
those
to
kind of
communicate and
conflicts.
not. And like I think we just know each other and feel it, which takes a while, but we've gotten to that point. Like
Yeah.
we're.
It's- Tell me if I'm wrong that you had, Hell Satan, you were just sort of focused on getting that film done.
Yes.
Very successful life. Went to Sundance, right? And did,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no. Oh, okay. And did,
Yeah. Premiered at Sundance.
um, is it then that you started thinking about, at what point did you start thinking, like, let's keep doing this? And once that happened, how did you kind of staff up? How did you make it so
Hmm.
that it would be something that would be
Right.
sustainable?
Yeah.
I think I actually don't remember exactly when we started talking about forming the company, but it would have been around the
I
time that Hail Satan was coming out. Do you remember,
I
Gabriel?
I remember, yeah, the first time we actually had the conversation, we were sitting. My memory is that we were sitting with John Barton it's at Sundance at
John
some
and
like
Dan Kogan, yeah.
yeah, at some restaurant and talking about like the vague idea of kind of like what do we do next and kind of
Whether I was
how
going
do
to leave
we
my teaching job and all that
exactly
kind of
because
stuff.
you
That
still
was
had
the
a
kind of
had a
moment.
full-time job and kind of the idea of can this become
Hmm.
some sort of machine that lets us do this because Hail Satan took a long time to kind of raise the money for. We both, were working on other things to pay the bills at the same time. Um, it was a lengthy process, and of course, because of that, we couldn't kind of be doing multiple things at once. Our hands were already tied with other things on the sides. So the idea of like how to turn this into any kind of endeavor that could take on so that we would be working on a project, and by the time that project ends we're already kind of started on another one. To be able to do that required it required Penny leaving her teaching job, which I think was an enormous leap of faith, a tenured
You
position to
think
do.
I left like
Yeah.
literally the most
Like,
secure job
yeah.
on the planet Earth
Yeah, to do that,
for
yeah.
maybe one of the least. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. um
but it was also like, look, it was a certain moment in history. Again, no one needs anyone to explain this, but 2018, 2019, we're talking about the height of like the tech
Yeah,
boom. There was a lot of job opportunities coming my way and
exactly.
our way. And so we had confidence that we had like a Quibi thing, like a lot of people had a Quibi show. We had a Quibi show, that was kind of paying a lot of money to do whatever it was. It never came out. And there were just, the phone was ringing and jobs were being offered to me. And so I knew that there was work. I had been
Yeah,
turning down those jobs because I had a teaching career and I did not need those jobs. But I was like, there are a lot of jobs. So it's not like we had some brilliant like business plan. We really didn't at the beginning. It was just that there was a lot of work coming my way. And I just had the sense that we could probably like string together, two, if we had two funded projects at a time, that we could like, make it work. So you asked about staffing. We had one
yeah,
person who had been my student at Colgate, who had been my intern, who'd been my assistant editor, who then became an AP, who then became, our first hire at our
yeah.
company. His name's Nick. And so he was someone that we kind of like Gabriel basically molded him in his own little image,
He
He's
was
like, now,
my little golem on Hail Satan,
yeah,
basically.
now Nick will
Yeah,
have the same ulcers that I have about
yeah,
like, is the card backed up or
yeah.
whatever his
All
things
my
were.
agony I transfer onto you, is
And
what
then
I
we
did.
staffed up a little more with a second person, Julia, a few years later. But basically, they're all producers and they're all molded by Gabriel as like, so that when he could go and has a baby, he can go have a
Exactly.
baby. And I have people around who know how to do the payroll stuff. Because I really don't, I cannot stress enough, like, know any of that side of what is done. Like, I don't handle hiring, pay. People ask me, what do you pay your DP? I don't know. The answer is I don't know. What's
Hmm.
the budget of your film? I don't know. Like I truly have delegated, and this is the beautiful thing about long-term creative partnerships, same again as in your personal relationships, you get to really specialize, and it's been a pure joy to like let Gabriel know, like to know that Gabriel will deal with the legal stuff and that I won't be the one waking up in the middle of the night with that fear. It took some time to like learn that by the time I've thought of something to be scared about, Gabriel has been scared about that months before and has probably solved it, and I never knew. So that's now a confidence that I have. But I didn't, that took some time to realize that I could actually offload huge amounts of what was keeping me up at night or stressing me out. Gabriel will find anything there is to worry about way before me, and he will
Yeah,
worry about it a lot.
yeah.
Yeah,
At
can
beginning of
you
any project, I make a list of all the potential worries and problems, and
Horrible
then just
things that
like
could go
absorb
wrong.
them all.
And
Yeah,
then we've developed this like, the little like Mutt and Jeff show where I'm like, whatever, that's not gonna happen. And then he's like, but what if it does? And like,
yeah. I sit in a corner, whimpering in fetal position
every
about all the
once in
things
a
that could go
while,
wrong.
I'm the one who's wrong and I get to really eat my words, such as not even that long ago when he was like, there's something weird happening on the Ring cameras. And I was like, oh, I don't see anything. Don't worry about it. And then he was like, no, I think something weird is going on in the office. And he went to the office at midnight to
At like
discover that there was a
11 p.m. Yeah.
giant flood. So I, again, like, will probably never live that down. Because I was like, you're being ridiculous. Go back to sleep. Yes. So he is the warrior king.
Yes.
And I benefit from that.
Yeah, it's interesting because Penny talks about you molding, Nick and others, and I
Mhm.
know I saw how you were in a sense molded by
I
Lori.
was molded by Lori entirely. So I really feel, I think about that often. Kind of everything I learned serially, I learned from Lori Cheadle. It's kind of how I continued working and thinking about how to go about productions. I imagine that there must be other, I mean, I
Ways
don't
of
know. Maybe
producing.
everybody does it the same way. I wouldn't know. I do it the way I learned from Lori, from watching Lori, and I've taught our people here to do it the same
Well,
way.
talk about
Perhaps
let's.
that is a distinct branch of kind of how to go about, or maybe everybody does it. I wouldn't know.
Well, you
You know?
learn first of all, you learn from the best. I mean,
I agree.
best, and so talk about like what is molding about for you when you're molding Nick or someone, how are you going about it? Or just they're sitting in on the meetings, so they're learning by seeing you in action. I know you take a lot of meetings probably and go over stuff, but
No, I wouldn't say that it's from that. It's more, I think, I think when I worked with Lauren, what we do here, the size of our teams when I was with Lori and kind of working on your things and other things with her at Hardworking Movies, Lori's company, and then when we're doing things here, you know, to the teams are still not gigantic in that sense. Like on the producer side of things, everybody wears multiple hats. When we started, I wore 100 hats, and I knew that because when I was working with Lori, it was kind of very often, especially in the beginning, it was Lori and me. And Lori did the big picture, the fundraising, the legal, the overseeing, the wearing kind of the heavy knapsack of responsibility. And I did the figuring out what gear to have and picking it up and schlepping it to my apartment and sitting up and doing AE stuff and etc. and all the different things. I was in AC and in AE and everything. And then you learn a little bit about all these departments, which is really helpful when you don't have the budget to kind of have other people doing it. But I also think even when you do have the budget to know how to do it, when we have that, to kind of have people on the producer team that know enough about all those things makes it possible to kind of know how to go about and setting something up and be strategically wise about where do you allocate money and time and schedule for things, because you've kind of had to do the pain in the ass work of having those roles in some capacity yourself. So that's a long-winded way of saying long-winded? Long-winded.
Winded,
Winded.
Long-winded. Listen, I'm Swedish.
I know,
Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
me, but it really is winded.
Your fallback
Winded.
is
Yeah.
I like
Yeah,
winded though.
I
It's
caught
like
it.
winded.
It's like you're
like
winding
there's
something
like-
up, is what I've always thought. Yeah. Anyway, so I think that due to kind of, um, but budgetary and logistical restrictions, and then kind of how I like to allocate money. For instance, like when this was frankly often the case when I worked with Lori on her productions, I've understood that that's kind of different from a lot of other films, but it really carries over to how Penny likes to work also. If we have a budget this size, a very good chunk of that is put into the post-production part of it and kind of like getting a long edit on things, which costs a lot of money, which also means that like we have to learn how to be efficient in the development phases and setting things up and kind of how we allocate manpower for things. And we did things very similarly, I think, when I worked with Lori. And that just by necessity means that I, and then in extension, the people who are going to work in the producer team with me, have to learn to kind of take responsibility in many different departments and how things are set up. There'll be producers and there'll be DITs at the same time, and they'll work with ingestion and BAs, and they'll sometimes do AC work and kind of schlep things. And I just think that's a very good way to learn how to run a production and how to think about what goes into things and how to learn to love all of your crew members because all their jobs are so hard because you have to sweat through it yourself.
how did you learn the funding part of it? Because that wasn't something that you were.
I never had to do it with Lori. There was always
Yeah.
a mystery when I worked with her. I
So
learned it, frankly, from I knew virtually nothing. When we did Hail Satan, I understood the budgeting part, as in like I understood the finances of what goes out because kind of I would have to hire crews. I would be helping kind of when I was working with Lori, I'd be helping running the shoots in that sense. I wasn't responsible for doing the payments, but I understood on a kind of more fractional level, like this is how much money we have for all of production, which means this is how much money we have for each shoot. I can understand how much I can pay and what is a reasonable pay for all these different positions, etc. I had never been responsible for um, overseeing, and kind of managing the spend for an entire film from beginning to end. Hail Satan was the first time that we did that. So I could budget it, but um, I didn't have enough experience to kind of know where I could bend, where things would break, etc. When we raised the money for that film, we we developed it for a long time. We had a really strong sense of what the film was going to be. I knew what Penny needed to make what she had set out to make and what she told people um, was the film that she was going to make, and we had a budget for that. And the way this film ultimately got funded, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think it relates to kind of the question of understanding how to think about money and what you need. We pitched it to several places, as we mentioned, And the people who eventually came on board for this was Magnolia. Magnolia made an initial offer for the film, which was more money than I had ever seen in my life. And I think, for a film, and I think it's fair to say
More
that.
money than I could imagine spending on a film, of course, because
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about how a film could be made. They said they offered us $750,000, and I was like, "Oh my God, like we're in the money, woo!"
But
And
our
then
budget was a little over $1 million, and I
1.1.
yeah, and I knew enough of kind of what we were doing that I knew that we couldn't make the film that we had said we were going to make for 750K.
750.
We just couldn't, at least, or maybe honestly, maybe if I knew more, we could have somehow, but we would have just like had to cut off. It wouldn't have been, a good film. We'd have to cut off all the toes on our feet and all the fingers on our hands, and we would just be flailing like dumb seals. So like it wouldn't have worked. So I remember vividly my first experience kind of being in like the quote unquote big leagues as I thought of it was that we'd gotten this offer. I talked to Penny about it. I explained to Penny that just like we have to say we can't do it. We can't make the film that we want to make for this, even though it's more money than we've ever been offered. And I called Dory at Magnolia and I said, I was so nervous. Oh God, I was so nervous. And I called her and I said, Dory, I can't believe I'm saying this. Like I've idolized Magnolia, which really was true. Kind of when they offered, it was a dream come true. Like I used to dream about getting invited to their Christmas party in New York. It was like if that was gonna happen, it was like I will have made it if I get to go to the Magnolia Christmas party. And then they made an offer for film, and I had to call her and be like, Dory, I'm so sorry, but I have to turn down this offer. I can't make the film. It was like I was like, thank you so much for believing in us, but it's just we can't do it, and hopefully something else in the future. And she just said, Gabriel, it's fine. This is called negotiating. Let us think about it, and we'll try to figure this out. And I was like,
And
oh,
then
what?
then they magically found the money, even though that was definitely the most they could ever do, and that was definitely
Yeah.
their final offer. And we had to say no, and we walked, and then they found the money. So
Yeah, and I didn't
um,
know that was a thing. I was like,
no,
well,
none
if
of
they
us knew
offer
this was
this
a thing.
much, and like, and it's not enough
they
for
were
me,
very
then that's
clear
the
that
end
this
of
was
it.
the top of this was it. So
Yeah.
we were like, this was for Hail Satan to answer the question. And yeah, and it was just like really a huge learning lesson and an excellent example of the kind of moment in my career that I would have said yes if I had if I'd ever gotten myself into that situation. I would have said yes because I'm not good at the budgeting side. Like I don't know what things actually cost. But at least I knew enough to know that I didn't know. So I knew enough to trust Gabriel even at that
Yeah,
early
it's
stage in our
true.
relationship. I
It's
just
not as if it
didn't.
led to an argument where it was kind of like,
No.
no, we have to take it. Like,
No, I just couldn't believe
yeah,
it. I was like, I can't
I
believe we're
know.
saying
Me
no.
too. Yeah.
Like, Kickstarter raising like 70,000 on Kickstarter was like the craziest, like, most money I'd ever raised. And that was like, it almost killed me. So the idea of turning down 10 times that amount in one paycheck, that felt crazy. And it
To
was,
answer a question that I saw pop up, yeah, so it was a pre-sale, it was a full acquisition, but the way that they managed to raise the money, the additional money, was that Magnolia also had an output deal with Hulu at the time. At the time, the way that worked was that Hulu would acquire after the fact a selection of Magnolia's films, so that Magnolia would license some of their finished films to Hulu after they were done. What they did on this, which they then turned into a model for several other films, is that they combined they combined their money with the future. They got Hulu to kind of commit
Hulu
to
did like a
their
larger than
acquisition.
usual, earlier than usual, like license,
Exactly. And
basically.
so those two things together, rather than kind of Magnolia being the sole funder and then
Yeah.
licensing for profit later, made it possible to make it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Magnolia and Hulu.
We could probably go through all of your success films from there on and do war stories and stuff, but I do want to allow time for questions from participants. So let's fast forward
Yeah.
today. And
Very different landscape than
Yeah.
Very
2018,
different.
2019.
I mean, if we had premiered Hail Satan, Sundance 2025, would we be saying, hey, let's start a company?
Hey, let's leave our tenured professor
Yeah.
job. Why not?
So
No,
what is
definitely
it,
not.
how are you
No
dealing,
chance.
how are you dealing with the new reality of the marketplace as a
I mean,
company? And
like it's harder. Like, we did, have to, furlough one of our two producers, which
Mm,
is painful to acknowledge, but we are very eager to bring them back as soon as we can, hopefully, to
yeah.
restore the full team because I really do feel like we need that.
Mm,
But that was important, and we're just, again, like we started out and to give ourselves some credit, we knew we were in a kind of gold rush bubble moment. Like it wasn't like we were idiot, like we knew. But the wise thing to do was to like take all the work and build this company and like get it off the ground, and we did. And so we've been able to, I can speak for both of us, like the commitment that we made going into this was like basically that we'd pool our salaries. Like that was kind of like the handshake that started Spinning Nancy. It was like typically on these budgets, our lines would be so different. Like the director's
yeah.
salary would be here, the producer's salary would be way down there. And I was like, I need Gabriel, so we're gonna like equalize that. That's kind of like the beginning of the relationship with the
Uh,
company. But,
c-
as I said before, not really that wise of a business plan. It was just sort of like get a lot of work, get a lot of work, do a lot of work, do a lot of work. And we could do a lot of work because I am very efficient and have no life and no family. And I have an incredible team around me of producers. I have three producers at my disposal pretty much full time. So,
yeah.
like, that equals a lot of productivity. Let me just finish this, Gabriel. You could
Yeah, yeah,
jump
yeah.
in.
Sorry.
So, like, no, it's fine. But just like the idea that, like, it wasn't we didn't have like a brilliant business model. It was just get a lot of work and do a lot of work. And that worked for like seven, almost 7 years. We've been able to pay ourselves a full-time salary, live in New York City, not have side gigs. This is our job. We make films for a living. It's incredible. It's like being in the NBA, but also like being in the NBA, it doesn't last forever necessarily. So there was a moment maybe 6 months ago where I was like, perhaps our NBA days are over because we're not a lot of money shaken loose from the
Mm,
money tree these days. And like the last funding on these projects we have is going away. So we briefly thought maybe we were going to be out of business, but things have been loosening up a bit. And we've gotten a couple gigs and some funding in the last just even few weeks to be able
yeah.
to keep going. So this is probably more the new normal of
Like,
like there's going to be gaps where like nothing's coming in, like normal, typical, probably pre-tech boom freelance
mm.
life where like I can speak for myself. Like I'm gonna have to learn to like how I'm gonna manage gaps in like months where there's no salary because I have not had that experience before, believe it or not,
it's
ever in
called
my life.
Substack, Penny.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. But
Okay.
yeah,
So
so it's
I,
definitely different. But like we've tried to lower our overhead to the extent we can, and just kind of hang on for dear life and like look for different types of opportunities to the extent that they come our way. I'm not about to go learn how to be an advertising genius because it's too late, and that business is also dying. So like.
hmm.
I'm not sure what other like side hustles we could come up with, but we're open. If anyone has any they want to suggest for our company, let us know.
I just want to interject something that I think is kind of important for anybody who's considering when Penny said that we didn't have a brilliant kind of business plan, it's true, of course, in many ways we didn't. But I think that the thing that you almost skirted over is the full reason that the company could exist, which is the fact, you know, you heard Penny say that we kind of decided to pool our salaries. I think that it's almost can't be overstated like how fundamentally important that was for this to be able to exist and how incredibly unusual that is. Like I've never met another producer who hasn't kind of like gaped at me when I say that that's what we did first. I think that now when we work on films, um, our salaries and the budget have come much closer
Much closer together than they were
when
because
we
I was the
started.
one they wanted. Gabriel,
They
they didn't know
didn't give
they
a
wanted
shit. It was
Gabriel.
more like Penny said, like, okay, this is my producer, and like, but in budgets, then the assumption was that as I'm sure everybody here knows, like, a director would make this much on a budget, and a producer would make this much, and the assumption would be that that producer would work on multiple things at the same time with multiple directors. I think the fact that Penny said, "No, we're going to pool our salaries," and I remember this very vividly. She really said, like, we're putting in equal sweat, equal work. Like it's fair. I also think that was extremely smart because that's what made it possible to kind of say, great, now we're actually like building this together. Otherwise, I would have been forced to kind of say, well, I need to also find another director to work with on something at the same
Why
time. And
even have a company together
why
then?
have a
Like we wanted
company?
to do
I'm
it
gonna,
together.
So I think for anybody to be able to kind of create that sort of, we're really in it together and we're pooling in that way when there's a fundamental disparity, I think, very often in kind of the amounts of salaries that are offered for directors versus producers. It's really, it's not something to just say like, oh, and then we decided that. I think also from Penny's side, that was really, I mean, she was effectively giving up. I think it's paid off immensely over the long term, but in
Yeah.
the short term, she really chose to give up money that was directed at her to say, let's pool this together to kind of build this.
Yeah, but I knew I
And
didn't
that
know
can
how to
be,
like rent a camera.
I know, but still,
I,
Penny,
I
like I think
literally
most
still don't know how
people,
to rental camera. I've still never like set up a rental package. Like I
that's
still have
true.
never like negotiated a rate with a DP. Like I have no idea still how to do
Yeah,
any of these things.
but many directors still would say, sure, but the producer will still do that, but they'll do it for their line item, and then
Yeah,
they will
whatever.
have that thing that you said. They'll have a producer on a film, maybe another one on the next one. You can't build a long-term thing like that. I think if there's any lesson as to like how we could put together an entity that survived and kind of would last multiple projects, that is the nexus of it. From
Yeah.
my perspective, that was a choice that was not at all something that I think most directors would have done, and I think it made this possible.
I mean, we've all seen directors like who like have to like plug into a different production company on every project and like have an entirely new staff on every project. And like, I'm not jealous of that whatsoever. That sounds
Hmm.
horrible. I have my people. They know how I work. They know what to expect from me. I know what to expect from them. Like, we're all in this together. We share
Yeah.
values. We share ethics. Like, so much
Hmm.
discussion around documentary ethics. Like, what about the fact that it's a team effort? Like, I don't know the ethics of like X producer at like Y production company. Like, I don't necessarily want to trust them to be doing subject outreach and pre-interviews. I don't even know them. Every once in a while, I've listened to some tape of someone else's pre-interviews, and I'm like, God, like I don't like if this was my project, I'd be so upset. So, yeah, so I think it's just the value in like being able to work, being able to, and again, like it just upped my productivity so much. Like I've made now 8 feature docs in like whatever 10 years. I could never have done that without this team.
Yeah. No, look, it's very similar to how I work with Lori.
Mm.
I'll work, because I shoot, I'll shoot maybe the whole film practically before
Mm.
she's really doing her producing work. But we split everything. I mean, we always
Mm.
have from the beginning and whatever comes
I didn't
in.
know that.
Oh,
Huh.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. No, we've always, I mean, I might get a little extra as a director, as a camera person in the budget.
Hmm.
And sometimes that pans out and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I
Mm.
mean, I don't even think about it who does more work time wise, or it's more like I really need what she brings to it. And
Hmm.
I'm so grateful, to have a producing
Yeah.
partner on it. So advice to all those people out there in the dark who are listening here, who desperately want to have somebody to collaborate with in this way or partner with in this way. How do they go about finding? I mean, they may not be at a sound mix where they see an intriguing note on a notepad. Um, it's something that comes up in our more low-key networking face-to-faces that we do here all the time.
Yeah.
The biggest issue, how do I find a producer? How do I get a producer? Um, they don't have money. They don't have been working for years doing every role. What do you suggest to them?
Gabriel.
I,
Silence.
well,
It's hard. I mean, I've
it's
never had a
hard.
producer.
I think that there.
again, you meet people, you try things out, like do a project with someone and you see like, but I think also like someone said in the chat earlier, like be the person who makes things happen. Like if you're looking for a producer, like are you looking for a producer? Are you like reaching out to producers? Like are you looking at films that you admire and love and can imagine like being in company with and looking at who produced them and like finding their email address to set up a the only thing I would say is that, like, it's difficult when you're starting out to sort of like ask of people's time. I think that's something that's very hard. Like, a lot of people reach out to me and they're like, "Can I pick your brain?" And I'm just like, "Oh God, if I said yes to everyone who wants to pick my brain, like, I would have no brain left and I have no time to make these films." So, you have to, I would just say, like, be very targeted in the outreach. Like, I want to talk to you about X project, like open-ended, like, can I pick your brain type responses to busy professionals, like, I think doesn't have as good of a success rate as like specific targeted requests or offers. And you have to also remember like what you're bringing to the table. If you're a director and you have a cool project, like a producer wants to hear from you. Like if you don't think
Hmm.
producers want to hear from directors, you're crazy. So it's a give and take. It's like thinking about the gaps in your own knowledge. Like I said earlier, like Gabriel was the perfect collaborator for me, not only because we like had some sensibilities in common and wanted to make funny documentaries, but because he knew a lot of things that I did not know. And similarly, he knew that I knew a lot of things that he did not know. I had like gone through the whole process of making an entire feature film on my own twice. He hadn't done that
Yeah,
yet.
exactly.
So there's a lot of things that you can think about, like what are you bringing to the table and how are you trying to like complete the puzzle? Like what is it that you specifically need support with? Because there's a million different kinds of producers. Not all of them do the same job, right? Anyway, I know
Yeah,
it's hard. The answer is it's hard, and like I didn't
exactly.
find Gabriel day one. Like I found Gabriel day 1010 or something.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was trying to think first here. Likewise, I had met, 1,000 directors, maybe not 1,000, but I'd met so many filmmakers in various capacities, but I had never chosen to reach out to someone like that before. Like I guess on some level the answer also is like you kind of have to wait until you really feel like, the Dream Code Yell thing is important because it really did feel like this really is a person who's making a kind of work that I want to be involved in. Not just like, here's a successful director or somebody who's up and coming. I mean, I'm sure that counts for something, but that wasn't the thing. It was, here's somebody who I, on a fundamental, philosophical, intellectual, humorous level, feel aligned with. I want to work with that person.
I still have a bunch of questions, but we do want
Yeah.
to open it up to questions from you guys out there. So if you have one, use the raised hand function, and I will start calling on you very soon.
I just want to also say, because like this is actually something that we need to learn how to say, Gabriel, more frequently. This
Mm-hmm.
is like our own professional development moment.
Mm-hmm.
I, our company, we have, as I've already said, at the moment, more producing power than Penny has the
Yes.
work to support. So part of how we've been diversifying the income over the last couple years, as like the amount of work being directed at Penny has slowed down, is that Gabriel is producing on other projects.
Yes.
And we have a team of people who can like pitch in different ways and line producing and everything else. So I just want to say that in case, like, literally, as someone saying like, how do I find a producer? Gabriel, you should be saying, I mean, I'm open for business to some
I'm open for
extent.
business, and we have a team, and that's exactly it, right? So like, it's true when you
We
talk about
have
like
other
what's
people on
next.
staff who also want to be moving up and also want like
Exactly.
producer credits. They are who Gabriel was 10 years ago.
And
So like,
I've wanted to be, I really am deciding to not be stingy and protective with kind of like how I think about producer credits. So like, but also just because like the people we work with, frankly, like I've given them enough space to work as producers. So the last two films that we made, both of them like are two other kind of producer staff people that we talked about. Each of them kind of earned their own producer credit, not like co-producer or associate producer, like a full producer credit on each film because they did that kind of work.
because they're real
But
producers
because
now.
they're real producers. But I know that there's often kind of there's an entrenched tendency I know in the industry to kind of like the producer on top want, kind of keeps the credits lower for as long as they can to kind of keep it lonely on top, so to speak. But it means that they've really learned to be full producers. I know that they can produce full stuff. So it's true. Like we are in an incredible position to have real manpower and horsepower when it comes to making things now, that we've kind of built a machine that allows for multiple projects happening at the same time with ostensibly multiple directors at this point.
And
Yeah.
the production company fee, of course, right?
Right.
Of course.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what kind of makes it possible. Yeah.
Definitely.
Penny, I want to talk a little bit about your Substack
Hmm.
called Penny Lane is My Real Name.
Or is it?
Are you okay? We don't want to get into the obvious question of
There's an FAQ on my
parents,
website.
parents Beatles fans or
There's literally an FAQ in the website, pennylaneismyrealname.com. See the FAQ for all name-related questions.
Great. So we don't have to waste any time going there. But in your Substack, which I recommend to everyone, which hopefully somebody, Erica maybe can put a link to in the chat. There it is. Whoa, ask and you shall get. It started out with the post about not getting into Sundance, which kind of took off.
Which I
And
probably should have run by Gabriel before posting, but I didn't.
and then you had a post called Success for the Rest of Us. So I want to talk a little bit about what that was about. I mean, you also talk a lot on your Substack about the importance of marketing and audience building.
Yeah.
So they're kind of it's all related, I think. Do you see your Substack as a way to build audience, and how are you going about it there? Is it just kind of
Yeah. I mean, I'll say a couple things briefly about it. Like, I had wanted to start a Substack for a while. I didn't honestly feel like I had the time because of the aforementioned boom times. I really was truly like working on 3 or 4 films simultaneously for the last 6 years. Like it was like a crazy, looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, that was crazy actually. But that was how I was operating my life. And so when things started to slow down on like the, jobs basically front, I was like thinking about how I'd once had a column in Filmmaker magazine, and I just kind of wanted to resume like this writing life that I had always had part of me that was into. But I also miss being a teacher, and so there's also have like a teacher inside of me. Like I'm very into that. Like I like to be a mentor. I like to share what I know, and I also like to share what I know because it reminds me I know things, which frankly I need to be reminded of all the time because I feel like a perpetual beginner. I don't know anything. Gabriel knows every film we start. I'm like, how do you make a film? Like I literally feel like I don't know how to make a film every time we make a film. So it's also gratifying to remind myself how far I've come and how much I know. And so all that is kind of part of the stew of going into that. When I had my crushing Sundance rejection, yet again, I thought it was a valuable thing to kind of share something publicly that I knew a lot of people were experiencing privately. And I also knew the film that had been turned down was a killer, awesome film that was going to be a huge success. Had I not felt that way, I would not have shared publicly
which
that it
film?
didn't get into Sun. This is this movie called Wild Inside, which is about an owl who escapes from the Central Park Zoo and transforms before your eyes in the film from a hapless zoo animal who can't even fly and certainly can't hunt for himself to this magnificent wild owl. And so this movie's so good. And I know it's going to be a huge success. So I was willing to like take the reputational, maybe the perceived or real reputational hit because I knew the film was so good and was going to be so successful. If I hadn't felt that way, I wouldn't have done it. I'll just say that right now. And also, I do not want people who are just starting out in their career to take any sort of inspiration from that. Don't tell people about your failures before you are successful. You really do need to try to project confidence and strength most of the time. Anyway, that was just kind of like a primal scream of a post, but it really hit a nerve for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And people started signing up and like pledging which I didn't know was a thing because I had just started my first Substack. And so people were pledging, which means that they were saying, if you ever turn on paid subscriptions, I'm kind of pre-pledging my support. So within a few days, I had almost $1,000 in pledges, and I was like, I'll turn on paid, why not? And so I kind of just like stumbled into it a little bit, but it was great timing for me because I was simultaneously thinking about part of my life that is my side hustle. I've always been like a workshop leader, teacher. I've done some stuff at Maine Media, I've done some stuff at Union Docs, used to be a professor, all that. I also love writing and just really getting into it. And then also realizing right away that what I had loved about crowdfunding, as much as crowdfunding was like in some ways the worst of times, if I remember my emotions correctly, it was also amazing because you put yourself out there, you put your work in front of the public, and you find people. People come to you. And it's not at all surprising to me that when I did turn on paid subscriptions, or even before I turned it on, when people were just pledging, a lot of those people who were pledging were people who I knew because they had supported Our Nixon 10 years earlier, or Nuts when I had crowdfunded it. And I was like, there's something about this that's so important. And one thing that I feel like I had, but when I was getting started, because I was crowdfunding and I was doing that kind of direct appeal to the public, I had a relationship. I had at the time a 2,000 person mailing list, which was like a good list because it was all real people. It wasn't like random names. It was like real people who I had collected. These emails were like gold, and all I was doing with it was announcing when I had a new film out once or twice a year, right? And so I sort of converted that. It was a MailChimp list. I converted that MailChimp list to my Substack and built from there. And I think that is why I've been so successful so quickly. It's that I started with a mailing list.
Yeah.
That was a real mailing list that I had a relationship with. Of those original 2,000, I probably lost half, but then I gained many more along the way. So that's something I just want to say too. Side note on like content creation, it's not going to be for everyone. If you're like putting a lot of effort into your Instagram, or you're putting a lot of effort into your Substack, or even Facebook, like a lot of people will unsubscribe. Don't be discouraged by that. That is normal. Every newsletter I send out, I lose 10 people usually. It's like immediate and it feels bad, but that's a good thing because 30 more will come. And those 30 are the ones who actually want to be there for like what you're doing. It's just like your art, like it's not for everybody. So anyway, so it was sort of started in a spontaneous way, but now it's something I'm like really excited about. It's a little bit about audience development, but it's probably like, a little more industry focused. And if your entire audience is like documentary people, that's not going to be a big enough audience to like actually make a career. You need your audience to be like people in the world, which is why I'm also putting a ton of effort into my Instagram presence because I want to find people on Instagram where most people are learning about what films to watch, guys. They're not learning about it from the New York Times critics, even though we all still want that laurel. Most people are learning about which films to watch, what films exist from social media. So I'm trying to figure out how to like direct people who would be interested in a movie about children's music to that movie, and direct people who'd be interested in my movie about kitty donation to that movie. And that's different than what I'm doing on my Substack. My Substack is much more like industry doc people focused, if that makes sense.
Penny, what do you do to have your Instagram posts stand out? Because, a lot of filmmakers make an effort on Instagram and they don't get much engagement. Do you do anything graphics wise or anything
You
to
do, you make it
embellish?
look like the kind of posts that you stop on if you're on Instagram and you're scrolling mindlessly and you ask yourself, what makes me stop? Is it a headline? Is it an image? Is it a question? Is it an appeal? Is it a call to action? There's like different reasons people will engage with things. Like if you post something that is like an inside joke to a certain community, they'll share that because it's an inside joke and they want to be on the inside joke. If it's like a provocative question, like maybe they'll share that. Like think about like what makes you engage on social media. Most of us are on whatever platforms we're on. And so if you just think about like what's working and what looks like an Instagram post also doesn't hurt. The algorithm really likes it if you put a little design into it.
And you do the design yourself? Because
Yeah.
you have elegant
I
graphics.
learned Canva this year, most
Okay.
important thing of my life.
I was gonna say the biggest thing of 2026,
Seriously, I
Canva.
can't even talk enough about Canva.
Really? How'd you
But
learn?
also think about like when people Google you, like think about like what people are going to see. Like I feel like a lot of filmmakers don't do this. Like the internet writes your bio for you if you don't do it. Like someone else will come up with something on a Wikipedia page because you're not allowed to edit your own Wikipedia page. I've tried many times to like fix things and add things, but it always gets bounced. So you want it. So now I'm very pleased because I literally made like an about me graphic that is now permanently pinned to the upper left corner of my Instagram page. So if anyone ever stumbles on my Instagram page or wonders who I am, there's literally an answer, and it's the answer that I want them to know. I want them to know these 3 things about me, and that is the thing. And now if you Google me, well, someone could check and see if I'm right about this, but if you Google me, that should come up on page 1 of results. It used to be Wikipedia, which I had no control over. But so I'm trying to, I remember Gabriel, both my boyfriend and Gabriel had the same thought when I made that graphic, which was why, if they're there, they already know you. But they were
Yeah,
wrong, and
we
I
were
was
wrong.
right. And this is the best performing post I've
100%.
ever done on Instagram.
People scroll
Yeah.
through and then they see this
Who's
graphic and
that?
they go, "Er."
They're like,
Yeah,
who's that? You
yeah.
know?
Well, also
Um,
the name doesn't hurt. That's where your name
no,
like
my
really.
name helps, although it doesn't hurt. It doesn't help when you're Googling because there's so many Penny
Exactly.
Lanes on the internet.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, there's an awful lot of Penny Lane references.
Okay. We have a couple hands up, so let's go to Alex first. Welcome.
Hi, friends. Thanks for being candid. Um, I'm interested in your post-production process, particularly like V1 assembly. You've worked all this time and now it's smushed together and it's ultimately not it.
Good
Of
yet?
course,
Not good
it's
yet.
not great yet.
It's always
And so,
bad before it's good.
right. So like that moment where you're like, okay, this is 2 hours or two, and it's like, what is that next step to like, let's start culling and thinking and brainstorming and getting to V2 to, V 5000 eventually.
Mhm. Well, it helps that I've done this a number of times, as has Gabriel. So a lot of our immediate, kind of emotionally, loaded reactions are, we at least understand in the history of this process, what they might be and what they might,
Yeah, we remind
so
ourselves out loud
yeah,
when we're at
I
that
would
point. We're
also
like,
say
let's
this is something
remember.
else. This might sound like a vague answer, like or not an answer to your question, Alex, but it truly is. Like I would truly recommend journaling through this process every single time you do it.
Mm,
Write down what's going on because for me, for example, I have learned that 6 to 10 weeks into every edit, I think I have to fire my editor because I don't think I've seen enough yet. And that happens on every
mhm.
film. And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, but I do know that I will feel that way 6 to 10 weeks into every edit because I keep journals. I will know that, the Gabriel and I both have the very good emotional habit of forgetting most of the pain and trauma that goes into every film. So if you don't keep records, you won't remember that this happens on every film. Like there's always
Mm,
this moment where like this horrible thing happens and you can't believe it's happening. And you're like, you know what? Wait a minute. We've been here before. So I
mhm.
really recommend journaling through the creative process, like as much as you can, as much as feels comfortable for you in whatever format, because you will learn those cycles. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. There are certain things that happen for me with every V1. And you learn over time. It's not easy to explain, but you learn over time how to trust your instincts, and what not to get too caught up on at that early of a stage. V1 of an edit is always a terrible edit. Like that's just the way it is. I just now trust that I like will get to the final version, which, your first time going through it, you don't know that you're going to get to the final version. It feels like you'll never get through this. But so I definitely, other than like the obvious, totally separate conversation, rough cut screenings, feedback, all that stuff, like, trusting that there's a process here and that you can kind of identify where you are in that process, I think is probably the most useful thing.
It's also an argument for trying to have the funding to do the editing all the way through and not running out of money at the rough cut stage
Well, this
because
is part of Gabriel's,
yeah,
Gabriel's being a genius producer is that doesn't happen to me that often. Like, the sort of things that happen when you're off on your own and you're just scraping together, like, okay, I got 25K, let's do 8 weeks of editing, and then you run out. Like, I don't necessarily work that way anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a much more rationalized process.
the hard way to work because you're going to lose the editor. And
Yeah,
Exactly. Like if you can't,
the editor that you
avoid that.
spent like
Years getting, months,
$50,000
yes,
looking at
and
all your
months
footage.
getting to
Yeah,
know and like
yeah,
learning how they work and all that. So consistency is, I find, very helpful.
yeah.
yeah.
Rachel, can you come on camera, please? There you are.
Hi. I'm still in my pajamas because it's my day off, so
Me
my
too.
camera was off. But thank you so much. Wanted to thank all of you for just all of this information. It's been super helpful. I primarily work in the film industry as a set dresser on narrative and commercial
Hmm.
work. I just finished directing my first feature documentary. It's been 6 years of
Congratulations.
working on it. Thank you so much. And I'm curious, I had a really difficult time just balancing trying to pay my bills, so personal finances with also trying to raise money for the documentary.
Hmm.
And so hopefully this question can be helpful to a lot of people on the chat because I'm sure other people are working jobs in the film industry trying to pay their bills, but then also trying to make their movies. And so I am curious about how you managed like your personal finances, Penny, whenever you were working, as
Yeah.
a teacher, and just the balance of that. And then in addition to that, I love recreational time. I love spending time with my family and my friends and hiking and reading and just relaxing and, self-care, taking care of myself. And I feel like that's really difficult to do when you're doing like personal finances and then also trying to raise money for the documentary. So just wanted to pick y'all's brain about that.
Yeah. I mean, a couple things I would say. I grew up very poor and very insecure, like in and out of homeless shelters. So like by the time I was in my 20s, I did have friends that went off to live the artist life. I was not one of those people. Like I was like, I need a salary. I need to know how much money is going to be in the bank every month because otherwise I will feel a sense of constant panic. So I bring this up just to say different people have different levels of tolerance for financial insecurity and like especially at different points in their life. By the time I became this financially insecure freelance artist, I had been a salaried professional for 15 years. Like I had kind of settled into like relaxing a little bit and not being constantly terrified of the financial insecurity piece. It has been a learning process for me to, in my 40s, become a person who is like confronting the prospect of potential financial ruin all the time. Like in our best times, even if as I've been like, oh, it's going so great. Like even in our best times over the last 6 years, we've always been what, at best 8 months away from bankruptcy. Should
Oh,
nothing, I mean,
at
at best.
best. Yeah.
So, learning how to like live in this new work environment is something I'm just still managing. I don't have like an answer. Like it's just sort of I am learning new skills in my middle age now, how to manage that stuff. I would just say generally, I think everyone knows this, but the more organized and calm your personal life is, the more
Hmm.
chaotic and wild you can be in your art. So I'm always trying to find structures. Like I'm really into routines and structures and productivity tools and like just trying to create order because art is really, really hard. And making art is like inherently chaotic, unstable, terrifying, crazy, unpredictable. So for me, my goals are to make whatever else I can in my life be orderly and sane. That's been harder now that I'm, freelance artist like the rest of y'all. It's hard. But yeah, just I had a salary like the whole time I was starting out. So I was able to just be, I made my first two features with no expectation of a financial return. I didn't think it was ever going to be a way that I paid my bills. I don't think anyone should expect their art to pay their bills ever. If it does, you're so lucky. Again, you are in the NBA. That's how you should think of it. Like it's that rare. So to me, like if I can find a way to pay my bills another way, I will.
Mhm.
Maya.
Yeah.
Hi, I actually had another question, but that was such a great conversation. I'm gonna piggyback off of it. I'm working on my first documentary feature, have no film experience. I kind of just got into it because I I have a podcast and interviewed someone, and that kind of turned into a documentary. And now I'm like, okay, I guess I'm a filmmaker now.
Right.
And um, and so feel like so I would feel so I have a full-time job and a salary, and that is kind of I need that like financial stability, like that. There's no way I'm like gonna quit my job and do this full time because that will cause so much anxiety for me. So I'm wondering because so many of the documentaries that I love I learned that they were like all in, like and you can just feel it in the story
Yeah,
that the people behind it were just like all in. And so I'm so worried that because I have a full-time job that it's
let it
not
go. I'm
like
not even going to let you
it
finish this.
won't
Let it
be
go.
successful.
No.
So I do have two co-directors because of that reason, which I know to a lot of people that you might be like, what are you doing? But that's the only way we can make it work. And so, anyway, just wanted to pick your brain about that and just like get some encouragement that it is possible
It
to
is
to
possible.
do both.
I
Okay.
made Nuts. Nuts took like 9 years to make, or 8 years to make, and it took me that long because I had a job and I had no funding. So like it took me forever. Like it was like, okay, I basically committed with one other creative collaborator who was my co-editor and my writer, Tom. We committed ourselves to one 3-day long weekend a month for like that whole period. Like we were an inch here, a centimeter there, barely making progress, but just committed to making progress until we finally figured out how to get the rest of the money in to finish it. So that's very normal. I don't think every documentary you've seen where you feel that the team was all in, it's because they all quit their jobs. Like, trust me, that's not true at all. Your passion is what matters.
Folks, we have two more people with hands up. That's all we can take. I'm just saying because we're like up against the deadline here. The out and Penny has a fairly
I
hard
have
out.
to bring my cat to the vet today, guys. Not because she's sick, just a
Mm.
checkup.
So Anais,
Um, yes, I'll ask my question quickly then.
Hi,
So,
honeys.
Hi,
hello.
nice.
I am working on my first two feature docs, and for one of them, we're getting pretty close to post-production. We crowdfunded our way through production, which is really exciting.
Cool.
And now
Congrats.
we're at kind of a crossroads where we're wondering, since we have this and it's in the can, do we start approaching production companies like yours who have more connections, who have more experience to help us get through post?
Hmm.
Or do we just like rally up, start applying for grants again, and start crowdfunding again to get us through the rest of the way through the finish line?
Well, I don't know, Gabriel, how would you answer that?
I think I would say that in general, I think bringing on a company, be it ours or another one, who have the experience to know how to finish a film efficiently and place people on it is a way to, from my perspective, it's a way to save money and not kind of like flail and throw it into the wrong piles. But of course, there's a barrier to get to that because, if, for instance, to kind of use the concrete example, if you came to us and you said, I would really love to partner with Spinning Nancy on this, and we looked at your film and we're like, this film is so cool, and we would love to work on this, but there would still be kind of a fiscal barrier in that I would then say, great, I have the team that know how to kind of work on this in the best way and will ultimately kind of save money on the budget. But that team needs to kind of be paid to work on it. I know that there are some companies, really big companies, who have the coffers to kind of do that as an investment of sort and say, we're paying for the team to work on it because we believe that
I
down the
don't think anyone
line a
else does that. I don't
sale.
think
I
anyone
don't
does
think
that.
anybody does it anymore, but I think they did it before. But at least
Maybe.
it's theoretically possible. We certainly don't do it, and I think it's true that nobody does it anymore because the idea of kind of like having faith in a sale that can recoup is just not realistic anymore in that sense.
It just depends
Um,
on your goals too. Like, adding to your team is a huge question mark. Adding to your team is adding to your team. It's like I said earlier, like who you choose to work with is like who you're choosing to marry. So, if you have a core team that you're very comfortable with, that you want this to be the team, like you don't really want to add more people to the mix, then don't, But so it's not rocket science. I agree with Gabriel. Like a lot of mistakes were made by me before I had Gabriel. I spent a lot of money on things, on nuts that I shouldn't have because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I do think that it's always helpful to have at least advisory people around you, if not people that you can afford to pay to keep you from making like the biggest mistakes that we all make if we don't have people around us to protect us. It's also, when you, again, this is why I said it's about your goals. Sorry to interrupt you, Gabriel, but your goals,
No.
like, there is a kind of like who do you know game, which like is true in the releasing, the kind of film festivals, the release, the sales. Like there is a kind of like at some point in your project, you're going to need some kind of credentialing. Someone's going to have to give you that like stamp of approval, whether that's a film festival programmer, like a prestigious festival, that can be a stamp of approval. It could be a sales agent who believes in you. It could be a well-known producer who believes in you. It could be a well-known anyone, editor who believes in you. There's different ways to add that kind of cachet to your project. And it really, again, it really depends on like a lot of particularities that I don't have the answers to for you specifically, Anais, but think about like what stage in the process you want to bring that kind of person into the process, because it also means listening to them. And I can say for myself, early on when I was making my first feature, I wasn't ready to listen to like industry people until pretty much the end. I had a pretty clear creative vision. I had been given a lot of advice that I thought was bad advice pretty early from people who knew better, and I wasn't ready. So for me, bringing on the credentialing started kind of late in the game. Once I had like a full rough cut that I was proud of. That was when I started to listen to people about what they thought the commercial prospects of this film might be. Early on, I was still trying to protect my creative spirit, and I think that can't be overstated. I don't envy young filmmakers who get thrown into the lion's den on their first film, like, like taking notes from HBO, like dealing with millions of dollars of other people's money. Like all that is like really stressful and hard to keep your creative, like the inner child that's just playing and like is just like taking joy from like arranging things the way that they want them to be arranged. Like as a young director, like finding ways to protect that is a huge part of your job. And again, that's why I needed someone like Gabriel to protect me. He protects me from a lot of that. And I get to like be a little bit more free with my creativity because I know that someone's out there who's going to keep me from like making any terrible mistakes or burning any bridges with executives that we should probably keep, not burned, etc.
Before I go to Kirsten, Erica, I just want to, you probably put a link to Penny's Substack in the chat, but can you put it in again before we close up? Kirsten, our final question.
Hello. Thank you both for being here. Good to see you virtually.
Hi, Kirsten. It's nice to see you. I know we've emailed a little bit.
We have.
I have your name. I want you to know that your name is pinned to a list of people on my Trello that have offered to be involved in projects. It didn't go into
so good.
It went on to like I have a system because people who write to you and offer to help you on your projects are, wonderful people that you should remember, and maybe you'll need their help one day. So there's like a list of names. Anyway, keep going.
Well, I hope that manifests one day. And this is something that we've talked about, and it's just something I just repeatedly come up against, and trying to move forward with a project when you don't have that fabulous producing team already behind you. I often find myself in this chicken or the egg situation when it comes to finding funding. I want my funding applications and conversations to sound strong and well-rounded with other professionals also committed to my project, but in appealing to potential team members to bring in, I want for their sake some funding to be secured so that I'm assured that they're going to get paid before they, sign on.
Yeah.
And I realize there's not a straightforward answer to this question, but it's just something I find myself coming up against, kind of a circular situation of where to put my efforts in order to put my best foot forward and to move the project forward in team building and fundraising, everything at once, throw spaghetti against all the walls and
It's
trust
everything at once,
serendipity.
isn't it? I mean, again, it's like I was saying before, it's sort of like this version of the credentialing thing. Like, if I know that people sometimes will fund, like some people will approach me, for example, about in Gabriel as well, about being executive producers on projects. This is something else that we do. We executive produce
Hmm.
people's projects, other people's projects. And so there are times where I will give them permission to fundraise with my name attached.
Hmm.
So and that's similar with, could be an editor, like a really want an editor with great credits, or, a DP with great credits, or anyone on your team that you can like put, you don't lie, you don't say like they're hired, but you ask them if it's possible for you to say like tentatively attached as, supervising editor, or tentatively attached as or whatever. That's one way people deal with that. But yeah, it is everything all the time, and it is getting your pitch down, getting your ability to sell. This is the place I think most directors fail. It's like you need to be able to convince every single person that you talk to, from a random person in line at the grocery store to the head of Sony Pictures Classics to that editor you want to hire or whatever. I know you're an editor, it's probably not the right example, but you know what I mean. Like, you need to sell your film and your vision to every single person that you interact with, and it's going to take a million forms. It's going to be decks, it's going to be log lines, it's going to be standing in line, it's going to be how do you like convince people that this is. Never forget that like everybody that you're talking to wants more art in the world. Like, that was the first thing I learned when I tiptoed into the film industry and I went to like do these meetings at what's now called Gotham Week, that was then called IFP Week,
Hmm.
where I met John Reese. It was coming from totally outside the film world. I was like, oh yeah, right. All these people like love film. Like, they like love art. Like, they can't all support me in this project for this particular today or whatever. But just realizing that like every single person you talk to in the course of your film career is a fellow film lover and art lover. And if you have an idea to create a work of art that does not yet exist in the world, that might exist because of your ingenuity and your hard work and your genius and your creative spirit, you have the thing that everyone around you actually wants. It's like that is the thing. Like, they want that art to exist. So like having that confidence, I think, is really hard because you do feel like you have the begging bowl out in front of you all the time. But I always, Gabriel and I do, I think, try to often remind ourselves that like we are the cool kids in this equation. Like, we are the ones who can make art exist. And a lot of the people that we're talking to are not the people who make art exist, but they are people who like are in ancillary roles around it, and they're excited about that. So you have to try to like find ways to convince yourself of that, and then ask people to come on this ride with you. Like,
I
That
couldn't
is
agree
a
more,
great,
and that goes, by the way, for distributors, for
yes,
film festival programmers,
they
you know,
might be a little jaded today, but
yeah,
inside of them, they still are like an art lover.
and they respond, I mean, they may not pick up your film, but
But you
they
might
will
meet them 10
respond.
years later.
Yeah.
So, presenting yourself like like professionally, but also with joy, enthusiasm, authenticity, and creative spirit is always a good thing. Even if like no one takes your film, for no one gives you the money, no one, whatever. All those people are people that you now know who exist in this
Hmm.
not that big of a world,
Hmm.
really, the film world, pretty small world, the indie doc world, don't you think, Doug?
Yep.
Kind of. So a lot of the people that I met sitting down at like my first ever, independent film week in 2010 or whatever it was, are still around. Like, they're still
Exactly.
running distributors. They're like at here, there, they're at this festival, they're everywhere. So you never know when you're making a fan, when you're creating a fan, even someone who can't help you now, they might be able to help you later, or, you know.
And you never know when somebody who works for you may be somebody you want to have
Yeah,
hire you
exactly.
later.
Exactly. I'm
Yeah.
so jealous, Doug, that you know Gabriel when he didn't know anything. That's like
I knew
amazing.
nothing.
I'm jealous.
He knew everything about that
Now
I
he's such a
didn't know.
know-it-all.
Anything I couldn't do, Gabriel somehow could do. I don't know
Yeah.
how,
I
but
remember those days differently, Doug. I think I walked around like a confused penguin trying to figure out how to use the
well, you
coffee
faked it
machine
well.
in your dumb
You,
office.
Fake
you
it till you
taught me,
make
by
it,
the way,
baby.
how to multitask with
Oh
note,
God.
Yes, that's true.
texts and stuff. But you were like totally invaluable, totally.
Thanks, Doug.
I couldn't have
Good
appreciated
times.
you more. So, by the way, what's the name of your company?
Spinning Nancy.
Spinning Nancy.
Okay.
It
Wow.
should be Dream Goat Yell. We realized
It
too
really
late.
should be. Like
We
we
really
fucked up
screwed
on
that
that.
up.
Spinning Nancy,
Can't believe we didn't do that.
where'd the name come from?
We were having a meeting, and Gabriel, who is, as he mentioned, Swedish, was trying to say lazy Susan. Like he was like, "We'll get
Yes.
one of those. We'll rent one of those, spinning Nancy's." It made me laugh really hard. And we were on the hunt for a company name, so we thought that was good to always remind ourselves that we like to laugh. Like if we're not laughing on like a given work day, we are
Exactly.
failing.
Yeah.
Failing. This life is hard as shit. Like life in general is hard as shit. Trying to make a living as an artist is like ridiculously hard. It's like really, really, really hard. We have aged ourselves and put our bodies through hell. Like it is really hard. And having a company and having employees that you're responsible for and like a long-term commercial lease that now you got to try to make good on. These are all like really,
God, it's
really
all ulcer
stressful,
stuff.
hard things. And so we just try really hard to remind ourselves to laugh. So our company
We have
motto
Yes.
is choose to LOL. We choose to LOL. Like we don't just LOL, we choose. And that again came from Gabriel because it was some horrible situation where like
I
God,
can't remember what it was.
I'm sure
Yeah.
I'm sure it was like the worst possible thing that happened. Like some
Yeah.
funded project, the company went out of business and we had to fire everyone. These things happen all the
That's
time.
happened.
And so I believe it was something that Gabriel said to me. He said, "Penny, I choose to LOL." And I'm just like, yes, we
And
have
now
to.
it gets repeated. And when I have a new ulcer coming,
Oh my
Penny will text
God.
me, choose to
Constant
LOL.
stress.
And it's really true.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Being a business owner is no joke, you guys. If you think like just being an
So
artist is
hard.
hard, try having employees too. Oof.
Yeah. We could do another session that's just me like whining for 90 minutes about all the
Long-
difficult
We have
long-winded.
next week.
Great, yeah.
Actually,
Come back.
we have one next week, but name your time, name your week.
Yes, Canva is the best, everyone. Learning Canva has changed my life completely. I make my own decks now. I can make a social media graphic in 5 minutes or less. It is worth it. Learn Canva.
Some wonderful person put a link in the chat to the a YouTube tutorial,
You
which I'm
will
going to
not
look
regret it,
into.
I swear.
I'm
Because
going
we are visual, we are working in a visual medium. All right, I got to run to my vet appointment. So
Thank you
good
so
to
much,
see you all.
Penny.
Thank you for your
Gabe,
great
thank you.
questions.
No, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, you guys were great so much. Thank you.
Thanks so much.